Well, I figure I've read at least 1,000 books by now, probably quite a few more than that. And after reading that 1,000 books, I've got about 50 characters that have stuck with me through the reading. They've become a part of my life in my head. They're like real people. They're part of my worldview, my mental landscape, if you will. I'm going to talk about those 50 characters, my 50 favorite fictional characters in this video. My name is Randy. I'm the host here. This is the Literate Texan. It's a channel on YouTube where I discuss literature, highbrow, lowbrow, everything in between. Definitely not snobbish here. And like I say, this is going to be my video where I discuss my 50 favorite characters in literature. This isn't a ranked video. They're not like in order of my favorites. It's certainly not meant to be any kind of definitive list of the greatest of fictional characters in literature. Although I think I've probably hit on quite a few of the greatest characters in literature, but some of them are purely idiosyncratic. They're just characters that I happen to really like a lot. And what I did was I thought it'd be better to put these into categories, but they're not in categories like, say, of ranking them in terms of, these are the greatest 10 here, and these are the 10 that, they're good enough for the list, but just barely. It's not like that at all. It's just categorized into categories that seemed interesting to me. I had a boss tell me, I talk about this boss all the time. The guy told me that performance is measured as performance improved. But he also told me, he said, Randy, man, there's a big difference between being a character and having character. And, I've thought about that through the years. I'm not entirely sure that I agree with him about that anymore. Is there a big difference between being a character and having character? I don't know. Let's think about that and maybe discuss it in the comments after I film the video. I will say this. I know that Aristotle says we are what we repeatedly do. And I think that's true. I think character is delineated by action, or it's described by action. And so what these characters do in their fictional worlds, that's what makes them the character that they are. So, they have personalities. They have quirks. When you think of someone who's a character, you think of someone that's eccentric, who's got quirks, things that you remember about them, things you remember them by. Maybe even specific phrases that you remember them by. So maybe being a character and having character aren't really that far apart. But at any rate, let's get on with the list. We'll see how many of my favorite characters are also on your list of favorite characters too. I think they might be. Okay, so the first category I've got on my list here are adventurers and heroes. These are the characters who go out and face the world one-on-one, head to head, and try to make their way in the world and succeed by going directly confronting the world. The first one I've got on my list is Alan Quatermain. And everybody knows by now that I'm on a big H. Rider Haggard kick right now. In January, I'm planning an event, Haggard-uary, or Haggard January. I haven't decided on a file name. He's the father of adventure fiction, who's been largely forgotten, but in the 1880s, you would have known who he was for sure. But he created adventure fiction as we know it, and Alan Quatermain was his main character in probably about a dozen novels. He was a forerunner of Indiana Jones. That's what I like to think of him as, although he's more of Indiana Jones, but not as an archaeologist, but as a big game hunter in Africa. Yeah, great character. Always telling everybody in the narration what a timid character he is in the first book, King Solomon's Mines. I got a kick out of that. Number 2 on my list here is, Michael K. Vaughan's going to appreciate this, Conan the Barbarian. When I think of characters who go out, and they're going to succeed in facing down the world with nothing but the sweat of their brow and their efforts, Conan the Barbarian, it's just hard not to think of him. Number 3 is another Robert E. Howard character, Solomon Kane. So Michael K. Vaughan will be glad that I included him. Steve Donahue will be less excited about him. Solomon Kane is a Puritan, and he's very dour, and he's going around and he's righting wrongs, but he seems a little bit inconvenienced about righting these wrongs. But the truth is, you can kind of tell the guy wants adventure. He wants to get out there and do stuff. He wants to get out there and get the adrenaline pumping. That's one of his motivations, although he might not ever be willing to admit to that. See, number 4 on my list is Tarzan. Tarzan the Ape Man. What is there to say about Tarzan? He's one of the most famous fictional characters, who's ever lived. Raised by apes in Africa, and the Tarzan of the books is a very different character from the Tarzan of the movies. So if you've never read a Tarzan book, I suggest that you read one. I suggest you start at the beginning and read the first Tarzan book. If you like it, there's a couple dozen more after that you're going to love. That's number 4 on my list. Number 5 on my list is Doc Savage. I was talking with a buddy of mine on the phone today about this list I was making. He didn't know who Doc Savage was, which is amazing to me because Doc Savage was kind of the first superhero, to my thinking anyway, for the first comic book superhero that we think of. Clark Savage has been raised to be the pinnacle of human perfection in every way imaginable by his father. And he's using that to fight crime and to have adventures. And one of the things that I like about Doc Savage, he's got a crew, Doc's crew. And, they're all leaders in their fields. He's got like the best surgeon in the world, the best lawyer in the world, and so forth. But he's better at their chosen fields than each of them already. But how Superman has a fortress of solitude and he's the man of steel? Doc Savage has a fortress of solitude and had one before Superman did. And he was the man of bronze before Superman was the man of steel. But definitely check out Doc Savage if you want to see the inspiration or one of the big inspirations for Superman before Superman came along. Let's see, number 6 I've listed. This one's more of the quirky one. This is the kind of thing that Ollie at Criminale will appreciate. Remo Williams is on my list of favorite fictional characters of all time. Remo Williams is a character from a series of books called the Destroyer books. And they were parodies of the men's adventure books that were popular at the time. But he's a character who used to be a police officer. He's had his memory and identity erased and replaced with a new memory. Well, not a new memory. He's still got his memories. It's just his identity and looks that have been replaced. And essentially, he's an assassin for the government who works outside of the Constitution. There's an organization called CURE, and the idea is that it's there to protect the country from the people who would abuse the Constitution to destroy the country. It's an interesting premise, but yeah, he's an assassin who's being trained by a Korean assassin named Chun, who I have more to say about soon. In fact, be sure to stick around too. You're never going to believe who made number 37 on this list, by the way. Number 6 on my list is Shane. Shane is the gunslinger from the movie Shane, but before that, he was the main character in a novel called Shane by an author named Jack Schaefer. But he's definitely one of my favorite Western characters, and certainly an adventurer and a hero. Number 8 on my list is Captain Kirk. Okay, so this is a little tricky. Captain Kirk, there have been a lot of Star Trek books published, okay? I've read that there are over 950 Star Trek novels that have been published. Now, Captain Kirk wasn't in all 950, but he was probably in at least a quarter of them. He's probably been in 250 of them, okay? So, does he count as a literary character? I don't know. He originally appeared on television. You tell me. I know he was inspired by a character named Captain Horatio Hornblower. I have not read the Hornblower books. Had I read them, somewhere there might be an alternate universe where the Literate Texan has read the Hornblower books and has Captain Hornblower on here instead of Captain Kirk. But this isn't that universe. This is the one where Captain Kirk is on Randy's list. Number 9 on my list is Aragorn. Aragorn, and you'll learn more about this if you're following the book club. The book club next month is reading The Fellowship of the Ring, and Aragorn is the real name of a character named Strider, who I'm not going to get into any spoilers about who Strider is or isn't or really is, or Aragorn is or isn't. But let me just say, he probably, if this were ranked in terms of favorite characters, he would probably be much higher on the list than number 9 here. And then number 10, Samwise Gamgee. Okay, Samwise Gamgee is another character from The Lord of the Rings. And you're going to, especially when you're reading through The Fellowship of the Ring, you're going to be a little surprised that Samwise Gamgee made my list rather than Frodo, for example. I don't think Frodo's on my list anywhere. Samwise Gamgee has got his heroic qualities, and they're heroic qualities that maybe don't recognize as closely as we should. But if it comes to loyalty, if it comes to who's got your back, Samwise Gamgee is the guy you want on your side for sure. And that's the end of that category. Okay, the second category that I've got here is let's see, Atticus Finch, the thinkers and the searchers and the idealists. Okay, these are people who aren't so much interested in conquering the world or bending the world to their will as they are interested in understanding the world. And number one on my list is Atticus Finch. Atticus Finch is, of course, the father figure and the attorney in To Kill a Mockingbird, which really is a very good book. Number two, I've got a character named John/Jonah from Cat's Cradle. Okay, so Cat's Cradle is a Kurt Vonnegut novel, and it's my favorite Kurt Vonnegut novel. And I mean, when I say favorite, I mean far and away favorite. Everybody mentions Slaughterhouse-Five. Most of these lists would probably include Billy Pilgrim from Slaughterhouse-Five. Slaughterhouse-Five, to me, just isn't as good a book as Cat's Cradle. And that's not as good a character. The character of John in Cat's Cradle is a terrific character. Number three on this list of thinkers is, I can't read that. Okay, we're going to skip to number four, John Steinbeck in Travels with Charlie. Okay, so I'm cheating a little bit with John Steinbeck here. As you know, Travels with Charlie is ostensibly nonfiction. It's ostensibly a travel log. But the truth of the matter is, it was largely fictional, and I think everybody knows that now. So the character of Steinbeck in the book, I would qualify him as a fictional version of the author. He's not the actual author. So, number three on my list that I skipped was Junior Thibodeau. Junior Thibodeau is a name that probably won't be familiar to most of you because he is the main character in my favorite novel, which is fairly obscure. It's called Everything Matters. It was written by Ron Curry Jr., but Junior Thibodeau is the main character in that novel, which is a terrific reflection on life, death, and whether anything we do matters at all, and whether or not it matters in various situations. Number five on my list is T.S. Garp from The World According to Garp. I'm just remembering it. And what a great performance from Robin Williams that was in that movie. The World According to Garp was, aside from The Lord of the Rings, one of the first adult novels that I ever read. It's absolutely terrific. His character is intelligent and charming and just so much fun. Number six, Henry Lightcap. Henry Lightcap is another one you may not be familiar with, but he's from a novel called The Fool's Progress, which was written by Edward Abbey, who's one of my favorite authors. The Fool's Progress was kind of his, I'd say his magnum opus, his fat literary novel. But Henry Lightcap is the main character. In the first chapter, his fourth wife has just left him, and so he gets drunk on Jack Daniels, bakes a loaf of bread, takes out his revolver and shoots the refrigerator, which is running too loud to suit his taste, and then gets his crippled old dog, and they take off cross country to visit his brother Will, who lives 3,500 miles away. Hijinks ensue, of course, but you also get, in addition to being a picaresque novel, you also get flashbacks throughout his life as he travels across the country. Number seven on this list is Andy Dufresne. Think about it for a second. Andy Dufresne from Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. Great character. Absolutely wonderful character. And yeah, whether you love the movie, the book, or both, you should probably love both. I do. Number eight on my list is Jay Gatsby. Jay Gatsby is, of course, the Great Gatsby, the star of one of my favorite novels, which I reread every year. What a terrific character. And Jay Gatsby is interested in understanding the world. He's also interested in conquering the world, but he's got his own way of doing it, as you will see if you ever actually read the novel. Does he succeed at changing the world or bringing the world about the way that he wants it? You know, that's the interesting thing about the novel. Number nine is Odysseus. Not long ago, I read a poem on here called Ulysses, which is sort of a sequel to the Odyssey. And it's about Odysseus. Ulysses being another name for Odysseus, having returned home, is bored because he's he's used to being out on adventures, and he spent so much time adventuring that he can't quite get used to a life where he's just basically an administrator. Even though he's the king, and he's the top guy, it's still pretty boring to him compared to the adventures that he's used to. Anyway, it's a lovely poem. And of course, the Odyssey, there's, what are you going to say about the Odyssey, right? Number 10 is Van Helsing. Dr. Van Helsing, of course, is the, I'm going to call him the Gandalf figure of Dracula, okay? He's the old mentor who has the knowledge about what to do about vampires. So yeah, Van Helsing's a great character. He's very matter of fact, and he's not always diplomatic when I think he could be a little more diplomatic. There's a great scene in one of my more recent readings of the book Dracula where guy asked him, he said, well, what are we going to do about Lucy? Lucy's one of the early victims. This is a spoiler alert for Dracula. See if you want to be unspoiled, skip past it. He says, I'll tell you exactly what we're going to do about Lucy. We're going to cut her head off. We're going to fill her mouth with garlic. We're going to run a stake through her body. And this guy that he's talking to was Lucy's fiance, man. I mean, Van Helsing doesn't pull any punches with people. He expects them to be able to step up and deal with reality, even though reality can be pretty ugly sometimes. The next category is called Detectives, Realistic Men of the Frontier. Okay, so it's detectives and realistic men of the frontier. These characters can be somewhat gray morally, but not necessarily. But they are tough-minded, hard-nosed realists, as my college professor would have called them. Number 1 on this list, of course, Sherlock Holmes. Number 2 is Dr. Watson. And I've got to say something about Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. It's recently become fashionable to portray Sherlock Holmes as being sort of this, not necessarily a sociopath, but a high-functioning autistic person who does not know how to get along with people. And this was not his presentation in the books. Yeah, he was quirky. He was eccentric. But, he also knew how to get along with people. In fact, he was rather charming a lot of the time, especially when he was in disguise. Dr. Watson, on the other hand, has been presented in film and TV as sort of a bumbling idiot for decades, when his character, as written in the books, is nothing of the kind. When Holmes needs a man with a gun that he can depend on, he tells Watson, man, the game's afoot, let's go. There's a reason he keeps Watson around. Holmes doesn't suffer fools gladly, and, they kind of let on like he's a lot smarter than Watson, but like I say, Holmes wouldn't hang around with Watson if Watson didn't bring something to the table. Part of what he brings to the table is a certain degree of intelligence. Number 3 is Philip Marlowe. Philip Marlowe is the star of Raymond Chandler's wonderful detective stories, of which there are only 7 or 8 set in Los Angeles. But he's a terrific character. He's been played on screen by all kinds of people, from Humphrey Bogart to Elliot Gould. I particularly enjoyed Elliot Gould's portrayal of him in The Long Goodbye, which is directed by Robert Altman. Really, really good movie if you want to see him in the movies. But definitely read the books. The plots are incomprehensible, especially the first with the big sleep. You have no idea what's going on, but it doesn't matter. They're just that good. Number 4 is James Bond. Dr. November is coming up in November, so I'm not just reading The Lord of the Rings in November. I'm also going to be reading the entire James Bond oeuvre, which I've read before, and I take that back. I'm not reading the entire James Bond oeuvre. I'm reading the entire Ian Fleming's James Bond works. After Ian Fleming died, Bond did get taken over by multiple other authors. In future years, when we do Dr. November and we do spy and espionage fiction, I'll tackle those other writers. But for this year, I'm just doing... Anyway, great character. Really great character. Sucking down 10 martinis a day and smoking 3 or 4 packs of cigarettes, going for a morning swim, engaging in multiple affairs. Man, that's all really great stuff in fiction. One of the interesting things about Ian Fleming is he tried to make it his lifestyle in real life, too. And it was not so successful. He died of a heart attack at age 53. Let's see here. That was James Bond. Number 5 on my list is Dwayne Moore. That might seem obscure, but he was in a series of books, beginning with The Last Picture Show by Larry McMurtry. And the book that I've enjoyed him the most in was Dwayne's Depressed. He's a successful businessman in a small town, but he gets depressed and decides, is this what it's all about? And decides he's going to stop driving. He's going to start walking everywhere, and he's going to go into therapy. And one of his therapists suggests that he read Marcel Proust's In Search of Lost Time, and tells him he could read it in a year. And I thought I was going to read In Search of Lost Time in a year, but I didn't. Might still get back to it someday. Then after that was number 5 on this list. Number 6 and 7, Joe Gargery and Pip from Great Expectations. Cannot recommend Great Expectations too highly. Absolutely marvelous books. And Joe Gargery is one of my favorite characters in history. Pip's a great character too, but Joe Gargery, wow, man. And Pip, by the way, is number 37, which I told you to look out for. I knew you'd be excited about that. But you're also going to love my pick for number 47, which is coming right up. Number 8 on this particular list. Does that say Gus there? That's crazy. I can't read my own handwriting. Number 8 and 9 are Gus McRae and Woodrow Call. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've read or heard of Lonesome Dove. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you're just not as old as I am. But those are the 2 main characters in Lonesome Dove. They're a couple of retired Texas Rangers. And one of them is a great lover of life. He's a real bon vivant, and he talks a lot, and he does his philosophy, and he drinks a lot. But he's still effective where it counts. But his best friend is kind of a stoic. It's all about getting the work done and getting the work done without complaining. And opposites attract, and that's how they become best friends. But one of my favorite aspects of literary characters are really strong friendships like that. If you can make a friendship like that come to life on the page, then you've succeeded at creating a character that belongs on my list. And then number 10 is Falstaff. Of course, that's from the Henriade. Falstaff is the big, fat, old knight who's really, really funny and brilliantly intelligent. But he's also morally corrupt. And that was number 27, by the way. Pip was not my number 37 pick. Number 37 is coming up in a minute because it's on the list of villains and antiheroes. I went to see one of the Hunger Games movies a few years ago with a friend of mine. And I remember which one it was. It was the last one, or the next to last one. Anyway, the main character is having to help out with the rebellion, but she's not real happy about it. And my friend called her an anti-hero, said I don't much like anti-heroes. But I really didn't think she was an anti-hero at all. I think she was just a reluctant hero, which to me is a very different thing. When I think anti-hero, I think of Wolverine. But I do remember my friend getting very mad at me for correcting him on the difference. That happens sometimes when you're smart. Sometimes when you're smart. Number 1 on my list of villains and anti-heroes is Iago. No one's going to mistake Iago for an anti-hero ever, okay? He's just bad and bad to the bone throughout. He doesn't get redemption. Number 2 is Dracula, also doesn't get redemption. He's the Dark Lord, basically. Speaking of Dark Lords, there's number 3, Lucifer from Paradise Lost, one of the most compelling literary characters there are. Number 4, Randall Flagg, the walking man, the walking dude. This is the villain for Stephen King's books, and he'll appear under different names, but usually he's under the name of Flagg or the walking man or the walking dude. He's particularly prominent in the Gunslinger series of books, but we first see him appear, I think, in The Stand. He's the big bad guy in The Stand. Number 5, Humbert. Okay, Humbert, I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, but Humbert is the protagonist of Lolita. He's a sophisticated intellectual who's convinced himself that he's perfectly justified in falling in love with this much younger woman. In fact, she's not even a younger woman, she's a girl. And anyway, it's really sick and twisted. His character is almost humorous in terms of the lengths that he'll go to intellectually justify to himself what's going on between him and this young woman. It's an interesting book. Anyway, definitely one of my favorite characters in history. But like I say, he's on the villain list. Don't get me wrong. I'm not aspiring to be like him. Number 6 is Khan Noonien Singh from Star Trek, who's riffing on various points during the Star Trek series. Ahab from Moby Dick, of course, because he's obsessed with Kirk, Captain Kirk and the Enterprise, or his white whale. But before that, he's a Lucifer type character. You know, he's not willing to just be a guest on Kirk's ship. He has to try to take over. Number 7, Richard III. If you haven't seen the wonderful Richard III with Ian McKellen starring as Richard III, you definitely need to see that on the big screen. It's really great. And what a terrific villain. You know, Darth Vader's got nothing on Richard III. Number 8 is Captain Ahab, of course, from Moby Dick. You know, we talked about him before. He's obsessed. Number 9 is Mercutio. I don't see Mercutio as a villain. More of maybe an anti-hero. Mercutio just likes to talk a lot. It gets him killed. It's unfortunate because I liked him. He's from the play Romeo and Juliet, but he's the most likable and interesting character in the play, too. Most of the characters in that play, in my opinion, are basically a snooze fest. And then number 10 on the list of villains and anti-heroes, Scrooge, who finds redemption. And, you know, is an interesting character because, you know, even though he's a villain and you hate the guy because you have to hate him because he's just terrible. But you also feel for him too because, you know, he's lost his humanity at some point. And then finally, okay, that's the top 40. This is my list through 50. Icons, Legends, and Visionaries. Number 1 on this list, I've got King Arthur. And King Arthur could have easily fit on the adventurers list too, but King Arthur's a figure of legend. I mean, you know, he's, basically invented the idea of chivalry and made a paradise of England when he was in charge of the Knights of the Round Table. But of course, it all falls apart because, of course, he's involved in a love triangle. Number 2, Merlin, of course, is King Arthur's mentor from the same set of legends. Number 3 is Gandalf, the wizard from The Lord of the Rings, who plays a similar role to Van Helsing or a similar role to Merlin in terms of being a helper and a guide. Think Obi-Wan Kenobi, possibly, in more modern terms. Number 5, Aurora Greenway. Aurora Greenway is the wonderful main character from Terms of Endearment. She's the mom. She's played by Shirley MacLaine in the movie. And she's wonderful. She's a wonderful portrayal of a character in a movie. But the character is written far more interestingly in the novel than she is in the movie, in my opinion. Yeah, the books, this is one case where, as great as the movie was, and it is indeed a great movie, it is not as great as the novel. The novel has it all over the movie every time. But yeah, Aurora Greenway's a great character. Maddie Ross is number 6. She's the narrator of True Grit. What a wonderful character. Yeah, you know, I can hear her voice in my head. As when I read the book and when I watch the Coen Brothers version of the movie. I, unlike most people, you occasionally, you run into plenty of people who say that True Grit, it's hard to tell which one's better, the old one with John Wayne or the new one with Jeff Bridges. The new one with Jeff Bridges is definitely better. I can put that to rest right there for you, okay? There's no contest. There's no sitting there thinking, I wonder which one of these movies is better. If you're honest with yourself, you know which one of those two movies is better. Let's see here. Captain Kirk. What is Captain Kirk doing on this list too? Number 8. Yeah, that's my mistake. Edmond Dantes he's the Count of Monte Cristo. I love the Count of Monte Cristo. I don't know why I've got Richard III on here again. That must be a mistake. I wrote that in my own handwriting though. And number 10 is Tarzan. I think some of these got mistaken, but I know one of the things that I left off this list, it went through several iterations while I was putting together, but there was a set of characters, and I count them as one character even though they're two. They're like a team. Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser are a couple of characters from Sword and Sorcery. Fritz Leiber wrote a series of stories about these two characters. Fafhrd is this almost giant barbarian from the frozen wastelands of the north. He's like 7 foot tall. The Gray Mouser, on the other hand, is a small, skinny, cat-like thief. Together, they are a team of thieves who work out of a city named Lankmar. And each of them has his own wizard sponsor sending them on quests. But yeah, they're absolutely terrific. They're my favorite characters in the Sword and Sorcery. I even like them better than Conan the Barbarian. Well, I was going to say I like them better than Solomon Kane, but Solomon Kane's not really Sword and Sorcery anyway, is it? So that is a list of 50 or so of my favorite characters in literature, okay? So I'm going to ask you, who'd I leave out? Who are your favorite characters in literature? I know you're thinking, God, Randy didn't even mention Don Quixote or something like that. Well, here's your chance. Tell me in the comments who I left out. Tell me in the comments who I shouldn't have included. And till the next video, I want to thank you for watching. Stay hydrated, folks, and stay sexy.